Well, good afternoon and thank you for joining us. My name's Jen. I work at the Design Commission for Wales. Welcome to this Placemaking for Town Centres webinar. Thank you for joining us. This is part of a series of webinars that we've been doing for about the last year, and we have a bit of a back catalogue now of previous ones that you can go and have a look at on our YouTube channel. Just to highlight the last couple so that you're aware of what's out there, we did one on placemaking for children in town centres and placemaking for pedestrians in town centres just before the summer. Then we had a bit of a break over the summer, and this is our first one back for the kind of autumn winter series. And then we've got two more that are scheduled coming up on the 13th of November. We've got one on funding ideas for placemaking in town centres, and that's going to include looking at crowdfunding for projects, but also the potential of social investment and social contributions that could be used in placemaking. And then in December, we've got one called Taking Care, which is about how we maintain our town centres and keep them welcoming and presentable, and all those things that help encourage people to visit them. I will drop a link to those in the chat towards the end of the session so that you can sign up to those. But for today, our topic is engaging, and it's a very important part of placemaking. Obviously, is engaging people and communities is a real key part of placemaking and a key part of our town centres. We have done a previous webinar on empowering communities, which looked at a variety of ways of doing that, of engaging and working with communities. And I suppose building on that, we've got two further speakers today covering different approaches to engaging people, and particularly today thinking about people who might not otherwise engage with their places or their towns, and how do we encourage that, and how do we reach those people, and not just to get them shopping in our town centres, but about really engaging what happens in their place and in their future and in the future of their places. So two different approaches and examples of initiatives that can be undertaken. Firstly, I'm very pleased to have Sarah Cutting from Vale of Glamorgan talking to us about their Your Place approach, which stemmed from their Public Service Board. And then Yvonne Murphy, from Omidaze, who will cover creative approaches to engagement, including her talking shop approach. So I'm pretty sure these two are going to give you plenty of inspiration and ideas. I know lots of people who join these webinars are very much in the thick of this type of work, and hopefully there'll be lots that you can relate to in these presentations. Please do drop your questions in the chat if there's anything that you hear that you want to know a little bit more about. If you've got questions for either our speakers or for me, then do drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll pick those up after the two presentations, and we'll have some discussion following that. So I will stop sharing my screen, Sarah, so I can pass over to you, please, and dive into your presentation.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jen, and hi, everyone. Me and Jen just went through, and I'm not the most technical of people, so bear with me. Right, hang on. Let me get up my presentation. Right, here we go. So as Jen mentioned, my name is Sarah Cutting, and I work for the Vale of Glamorgan Council on our Tackling Deprivation project, which we renamed Your Place. And kind of that's part of our engagement approach, really, is that we don't want to use the word deprivation when we're talking to people. So by calling it Your Place, it's a lot more encompassing and engaging. So the project, as Jen mentioned, came about through our Public Service Board partnership. I'm going to make an assumption that you all know around the Public Service Board, but it involves the Health Board, the Police Force, our local voluntary service, the Fire Service, Natural Resources Wales, and Public Health, I think. So they pull together a wellbeing assessment, and the outcome of that was to do some more work around our most deprived communities. And the Wales Index of Multiple Deprivation of 2019 highlighted that in the Vale we have 3 areas that are all in Barry. If any of you know the area, they're all in Barry, and they feature in the top 10% most deprived in the whole of Wales. Oh, hang on. Sorry, my screen is there. We go. So the objectives of the project were to understand the deprivation drivers from a grassroots perspective, making sure that we're engaging with the community, to align the services to the needs of the community. And that was really key in engaging not only with the community, but transferring those opinions and thoughts over to the Public Service Board partners, so we can align the services to the needs of the community. Working again with the community and the Public Service Board partners to co-produce local solutions, so that there was a great deal of ownership around it from being community-led and professionally led. An outcome of that would be the improving the service delivery. And something I feel quite passionately about is sharing the learning. You know, we work better together than we do separately, and if we're all on the same page, we've all got that same data, why wouldn't we share it? So just a little bit about the locations. You can see on the map on the right, the darker blue areas are the lower super output areas, which is how the Wales Index of Multiple Deprivation works. Those are the 3 in the Vale that are in the top 10% most deprived in Wales. So just a little bit of background on them. So all in the top 10% most deprived in Wales, due to being ranked in the 4 domains of deprivation with the largest weighting, those being education, employment, health, and oh gosh, I've forgotten the last one. Education, and income. There are 7 deprivation factors. So the other ones are physical environment, community safety, housing. That's it. Access to services. Sorry. So in terms of income, there's been a consistent increase in the number of people in receipt of universal credit in the Vale, both in and not in employment. Within these 3 LSOAs, they have the highest number of people in receipt of universal credit, and the majority of these are not in employment. There's an 8-person gap, so this is regards to health. There's an 8-person gap between those with a GP recorded chronic health condition per 100 people in Gibbons Down 2, one of the LSOAs, and in Court 3, another LSOA, there's an 11.8-person gap between those with a GP recorded mental health condition than the Vale average. So people living in those areas would be more likely to have a chronic health condition or a mental health condition. People in Buttrell's 2 are much more likely to die prematurely under the age of 75 than the Vale average. In terms of numbers, because I find this quite outstanding, the Vale average, I think, is 336 people per 100,000 death rate and under the age of 75. In Buttrell's 2, it's 857, so it's more than double. In the other 2 LSOAs, Gibbons Down and Court, it's around the 650 mark, so it is double, but I mean, that's just an outstanding figure to me. And then in terms of education, adults in all 3 areas with no qualifications average at 32% versus the Vale average of 14% and the Wales average of 19%. So you can see these 3 areas have similar challenges and similar indicators on the index of deprivation. So it's a really important piece of work. So the way that we approached this, I've put consistency at the top because I feel that that is the biggest thing. In our seldom heard communities, there is consistently a mistrust of authority, and that isn't just council, that isn't just police force, it's any authority whatsoever. And so we've really got to break those barriers down, build the trust, and encourage deeper engagement to really hear what people have got to say. When I first started going out and about, everyone was talking to me about potholes and fly tipping, but the more I went back, and from a work point of view, it wasn't hugely efficient, but I really got the proper nitty-gritty of conversations by going back, becoming familiar, rolling up my sleeves, doing the washing up, drinking the coffee and gossiping. That's what I lived off of, really. I started to hear more conversations about domestic abuse and healthcare challenges. Um, Joining existing events, something that we found was that if we put on a workshop to focus on the project, nobody would turn up. But if I joined a lunch group or a warm space that was already having 20, 40 people arrive, as long as I kept it, and that's another one of my points, really informal, don't go suited and booted, go in my normal clothes, don't take a clipboard, don't take a laptop, take your notebook. Um, as long as I went to those places where they already were and just went around and chatted to people, I got a lot more out of it than running a separate workshop. Um, Activities, again, were really important. Activities isn't quite the right word to describe this, but I couldn't think of a better one. So what I mean by that is I went to a mother and toddler group, and I had a wishing tree, and I said, right, write down your ideas on these leaves of what you want for the future of your children. That was just too blank canvas, and I didn't really get anything back in. So what I did find then, if I go in, we went to a school group and said, how do you feel about your route to work? Can you draw your route to not work, school for us? And they drew it, and they would draw the bits that they found scary, and they would draw the bits that were dark and they didn't like, and they would draw the bits that they liked. And so that was sort of using a rich picture approach, but having an activity to draw stuff out, we got a lot more engagement than we did if it was just too blank canvas. So sort of be a bit clever with the activities that we had, and then just in sort of more of overlining approaches, a sort of placemaking approach, community-led discussion to drive sustainable futures, making sure that people are engaged in it and part of the process, and then a co-partnership approach. So working with the PSB partners, service deliverers, but then also with the community to implement actions so that it's definitely community led. So we found that those were really strong ways to get that good engagement. So just in terms of the activities that we did throughout the project, so we reached 1,700 individuals and 101 professionals across 69 sessions. So you can see there that we repeatedly went back to these locations to speak to the same people over and over again, to build trust and gather grassroots insights to inform our actions. From that, we worked with our steering group to highlight the domains in line with the Wales Index of Multiple Deprivation of what we would focus on. As a steering group, we decided to focus on health and employment because they were the biggest domains for all of these areas and ones that we could impact the most, we felt, to start with. So in those, we had specific workshops that we brought together professionals and community. We got community there by offering travel, making sure that they came with a familiar service lead, so a family engager from the school or their local counsellor whom they trusted. That made it a little bit easier for them to come into a room. They shared ideas, tackled challenges, and the professionals gained a real insight into the local lived experiences and how their services were used. And on the back of that, then, we formed some subgroups to develop sort of more pointed project plans. I'll go into that in a bit on the next slide. It created strong collaboration and ownership from our partner organisations and from the community. Oh, hang on, sorry. See, that's better. So in terms of the engagement that I mentioned there, within the community, we went to warm spaces, food pantries, Weight Watchers. We chatted with our local councillors, our local community centres. We went round to local businesses, and then just to make sure that we were picking up people that weren't engaged in these community events, we went door knocking with our housing managers to make sure that we were with someone who they knew, they trusted, they would talk to us a bit more. But those people that weren't leaving their house so much, we were getting their voice captured. And then internal council departments, so our youth clubs, our play team, we went to their events. Local schools were really key to this. Family engagers that engage within the school with key families. They provided a real safety net. They're trusted by the community, and so therefore they encourage people to talk to us. And then local events, Christmas light turn on, family fun days, as long as you've got something, as we all know, chocolates or a game or an activity, we we managed to get enough people to talk to us. We collaborated with a lot of community groups on certain projects. So Public Health Wales, new local workshops, our Pencoitra Learning Cluster, so a local school cluster, thriving communities. And then we worked with lots of professionals as not as part of the PSB. So our Vale Domestic Abuse Services, Keep Wales Tidy, Age Connect, Cardiff Bus, just to get a real full picture and get those views of the groups that those professionals dealt with as well, so that we were really creating a good picture. So what we've achieved so far, we've been running this project since August 23, which I probably should have mentioned at the beginning. But we've got some achievements so far. So under employment, we've created an after-school skills pilot at Whitmore High School, and that is for children and parents. We found that a lot of parents of secondary schools weren't engaging as much as they were in primary. So that started last week, and we had 8 family units arrive, all from our targeted postcodes. We've also encouraged a partnership between our Vale of Glamorgan Council housing team and our employment team rather, and our Havod housing team, which is an external housing association, to work together on like a mobile outreach van to expand their employment services. Under health, we've created, or rather, the parents have created peer-to-peer support groups for neurodiverse families. We went round lots of the schools with the family engagers, as I mentioned, to talk about successes and challenges around neurodiversity in primary school age families. And we found that they didn't feel there was much support peer to peer where they could speak in a room about how they felt as parents. And so in 2 schools, off the back of that, we supported them to create a peer to peer monthly drop-in group. We've also, as part of that same engagement, had the regional partnership board attend with us, and what they learned was we have a directory called the Index for Disabilities. And only around 30% of the parents were signed up to it. So they're now changing the enrolment in Vale for the index so that it's they need to opt out rather than to opt in. So that's a real success. It's not in place just yet because they're waiting for IT systems to be updated, but it will come and it'll be really good. And then we're also running a localized health event where people can have their blood pressure checked, have their vaccines, and that's in line with the health board. The vaccination van will be there. We'll have charities there they can have hearing tests, mobility scooters, etc. So we're really excited about that. Access to services. Through these conversations, we've upgraded certain bus stops in the areas that were very run down. We've utilised our notice boards in social housing flats to promote cost of living services. And we've updated our cost of living web pages in the council so that they were a bit more accessible. They were very council speak and they were putting people off, really. So we're updating those so they're a bit more open to everyone and addressing the average reading age. And then with our housing, we've worked with the housing team and given them feedback so that they have now installed in our social housing flats external refuse areas, because their recycling used to have to be kept inside and it was quite nasty. So now they're outside, so that's good. And we've added in some handrails for accessibility in certain walking routes. So, you know, some small wins, some bigger ones, but you know, the small wins are important for the community to see that things are happening and working and they're being listened to. And it's all about building trust, really. Right, next page. So the takeaways that we've gotten so far from this project is about empowering seldom heard voices. We prioritize the lived experience and the grassroots insight to shape interventions that reflect a real community needs to our public service board partners. We've built trust, as I've mentioned. This is a real key one for me. People won't give you a true reflection of their thoughts and feelings unless they trust you. So informal, repetitive, inclusive, place-based engagement with the community. Through that, we've amplified our local voices to shape services around lived experience through the PSB and their service is. We've created sustainable change through ownership, so that collaboration with the community and with our PSB partners and encouraging them to work together better has ensured shared ownership and long-term commitment of these services going forward. And again, that's all about the collaborative action. It's taken all of us to be in part to make that happen. Our public services, our voluntary services, and our community has all led to the tangible improvements, and it's taken ownership from all of them, which has been great. So, oh, hang on. That was it. Thank you very, very much. And I welcome any questions in the chat.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, do pop any questions for Sarah in the chat. We're going to do questions after both the speakers, so yeah, channel it that way, and then we'll pick those up afterwards. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really helpful background to all the work you've been doing there, which is brilliant. Over to Yvonne, please, and I'm going to share your slides. So let's test my skills now to get this working.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I hope you're well. Thank you so much for having me today. So I am going to share a couple of videos and some photographs to help me tell a story this afternoon. So the videos are going to, because I like to bring people into the rooms where I go and speak. So I like to bring the visitors, the Talking Shop visitors in, and I also like to let people see as much as they can what the Talking Shop actually looks like. So, introduction to myself first. I have been a professional creative and theatre director and producer for over 30 years. I'm also a trained teacher and experienced teacher. And I am particularly fascinated by the intersection between cultural and democratic participation. So, before I tell you any more about the Talking Shop, we're going to have a little look at this video, which is the next slide. Thank you so much.
It's a judgmental free zone. It's unique, you don't see many places like this. And it's nice that you can come here and do your own thing. It's nice to have your own space with people that can help you.
It brings people together and lets them learn about stuff. I think it's important for the community. I think having a space like this, all ages as well, can come together and like just meet and discuss these different important topics really that I don't feel like get discussed enough.
I do want to vote more because this year specifically I've gotten a lot more involved with what's happening. So I would think that it's useful for people my age as well to know that we are able to vote.
Spaces like this are super important for the community, just for the fact that it gets people talking and it gets people into the arts, it gets people being creative, while also just showing them that it's a safe space and that they can just relax in it as well. And it's a free cup of tea.
Thanks, Jen. So I'm going to tell you a little story about how all of this happened. So imagine way back before COVID, all those years ago, back in 2017, if you can imagine that, remember that far back, I was directing a last part of a trilogy of shows in the Wales Millennium Centre. And I had this idea for a place where you could go and artists and the members of the public could come together and meet each other and start to have big conversations about what kind of society they wanted going forward and how together we could make that happen. And this idea came about because of lots of reasons, partly because of a workshop that I was running together with that last show in schools, which in the first hour explained Romeo and Juliet and Shakespeare and iambic pentameter, and then in the second hour explained how our whole democracy worked and fitted together. It was a very overly ambitious 2 hours, but it worked, and it had amazing response from the students, but also from the teachers, and any adult that I spoke to said, oh, I could do with that workshop. So I had that kind of going on in my head. And also I'd been seconded to something called the What Next movement, where I was working with cultural leaders all over the UK and having big conversations about how we could get everyone, politicians and all members of the public, to understand the value of arts and culture to society. And I was thinking, you know, the people who are missing from these conversations are members of the public. So all of that was going on for me. And at the same time, I'd become politically active and I'd stood on a lot of doorsteps, and I started to understand that actually I wasn't in the minority, and that lots of people like me didn't understand how our democracy all worked and fitted together. So there was lots going on in my head. And I had this idea for a place where we could all come together and start to talk about these things, and also where creatives could try out their ideas instead of just saying, you know, come and see my show when it was actually made. They could go and talk to members of the public about it when it very first started. So I opened this shop eventually in 2019 next to Burger King and opposite Cardiff Castle. I had literally no money. I was trying to work out what my next show was, so I put some playwrights in there to talk to people with me, and I sat there every day and I thought maybe no one will come, and they came. Over 500 people walked into that shop in the month that it was open. I had no money to advertise it. I painted big questions all over the walls, like what kind of society do you want, and how do we ensure that future citizens and generations are engaged, and what makes you want to vote? Really big questions that would start and provoke conversations. And they all came in, and I created a what wall, where you could find out information about how our democracy worked and fitted together. And I made a what's on wall that everyone could add to, so that you could walk in and find out anything that was going on in the city that was cultural or creative, from shows to music to gigs to comedy. Because as someone who works in the creative sector, I find it really hard to find out what's on quite often, or I'll find out and it's nearly finished or it's sold out. So I was interested to see if anyone else thought a space like this would be useful or interesting. And the response was overwhelming, in that every single person who came in there said, we really need this, we really want this. And so I interrogated what had we lost, or what had we never had? And we talked about the demise of pubs and working men's clubs, and the demise of places of worship, and underinvestment in grassroots community initiatives. So places and spaces where people might have come together and congregated and had conversations. Then we also talked about all the problems with those that existed, because they involved alcohol, or they didn't invite everyone into the spaces and people didn't mix. And lots of people talked about how when things are promoted, they're quite often to segregated groups. So this is for young people, this is for old people, this activity is for homeless people, this activity is for ex-offenders. And we don't seem to have a lot of places and spaces where everyone can come together, and you're not defined just by that identity because you're over 55, or because you particularly like knitting, or because you've got mental health issues. So I was like, okay, this is interesting, that I've kind of, it's not just me that wanted this space that I could walk into. And then COVID happened, so all the theatres shut. I couldn't go and create any more shows. And my idea to test this talking shop on a long-term basis in Cardiff also couldn't happen because the shops weren't open. But I had this one thing that I was working on, which was lots of people had come to me in the shop and said, can you just show me somewhere on my phone that explains all the basics of democracy in the way that you just explained it? So the difference between local government, devolved government, and UK government. The difference between the First Ministers and Prime Minister, how our votes are counted, how old we have to be to vote, what devolution is and what is devolved. So the absolute basics. And I went away and I couldn't find anywhere online that explained all of that. And I mean the absolute basics in one place. So I was already working with the engagement team at the Senedd. They're brilliant and they explain the Senedd. I was already in touch with the Westminster engagement team who explain Westminster really well. And I found lots of videos, some really good, some poor, that explain different components. But I was struggling to find it all, everything explained in one place. So I had a very small piece of funding that allowed me to start work with just 10 young people from all over Wales. And I paid them as young co-creators to go, okay, let's have a look at what exists and then tell me how you would create or curate what's already there differently. And that started the Democracy Box. And basically then we wrote the Democracy Box story, which contains all those basics. And young people said, we need that in 3 places. We need it online across multiple media platforms. We need it in schools. And then we also need it face-to-face in our communities. So we created prototypes for all 3, which are ready to upscale and are actually being upscaled now in the terms of the schools one. This afternoon, I'm doing another session with Cardiff schools and teaching the teachers the Democracy Box story, and then how to make all their students Democracy Box storytellers. The online prototype is ready to go. And the in-face person-to-person brought me back to the talking shop. So this is in 22 by now, and these young people have been online for 2 years, and they said, we really want this information face to face. We want to be able to walk in the door to somewhere and just find out this information. Thank you, Jen. You can just click through all those photos for me. That would be brilliant. And we'll get to the next video then. So I said, okay, let's try and put the Democracy Box inside the talking shop. So that's what I've been doing since 2022. I've been trialling the talking shop all over Wales. So I've trialed it in Blackwood, Merthyr, Newport and Cardiff. And the Democracy Box story is on the walls. It's on iPads, it's in booklets. The hosts, who are all freelance creatives across all practices, poets, actors, musicians, dancers, you name it, they're in there hosting the talking shop. And they also know the story and they can facilitate it. And what I found in the last 3 years while trialing it is how to make sure these doors can be open to absolutely everyone. And everyone who walks into that space, the most basic thing that happens is they're shown around the space. Everyone's given a free cup of tea, because I've discovered that tea has a whole different connotation to coffee, and that's what you invite people in and give them in your own house. And it allows people to settle and sit down, but also be communal in a way that coffee doesn't. Everyone is invited to take part in a talking circle and talk about the question of the day, but no one has to do anything. They can take part in any way they want in the shop. There's loads to do. There's books to read, creative stuff to get on with, loads of information around the space. There's a signposting pillar that signposts people to all kinds of services. And then there's creative activities on every single day. And we use those creative activities to engage people into the shop, but also to facilitate democratic deliberation. And I've discovered things like, you know, the way that I've designed the shop is in collaboration with every single visitor. and over 17,000 visitors have been recorded. And I've collaborated with loads of organisations who have either funded the shop or have also co-hosted the shop and helped programme the shop. And as in a result, they then get the data that comes out of the shop, because we are drowning in data. People are telling us everything. They're telling us about housing, transport. They're telling us about isolation, loneliness, urban design, jobs, skills, unemployment, employment, what infrastructure needs to change. You name it, they are talking about it in that tiny shop. And what I have now modelled is a way that the talking shop can exist anywhere. And going forward now, what I'm trying to do is bring together a first core set of partners to open the first long-term talking shop. So basically the model is that we have core partners who fund it, and then collaborating organisations who might put a little bit of money in, but also put in time and resources, so help co-host it and help programme it. And then all of those core partners have access to all the stuff that's coming up. Oh, that's the video, hold on. And have access to everything all year round. So basically, we don't need to do consultation in the way that we're doing it now, where we're basically saying to people constantly, would you like a fruit? We've decided you need a fruit bowl. Do you want apples or pears in it? We don't even know if people want a fruit bowl, let alone if they've got a table to put it on, if they're allergic to fruit. We haven't got that bottom line information before we can do that very fine just that the consultation just should be being used to get really binary answers. We need to get all the grassroots information, and the talking shop can help all public bodies to plug into it together, to be having a conversation with people all year round. And finally, here is the assistant producer from Blackwood, who is going to show you the Blackwood shop so that you can see what it looks like, or what it looked like before we finished. Thanks.
Hello and welcome to the Talking Shop in Blackwood. So if you want to just come inside, I'll show you all the different areas of the shop. So here on our wall here is called our What's On wall, and this tells you what is going on in our shop, all the free workshops, or what's going on in Blackwood or the surrounding areas culturally. To the right, what's going on in our shop, then to the left, what's going on in Blackwood. The Talking Shop is essentially a creative and cultural democratic information centre. This is our kind of tea station area where people come and sit, chat about conversations, idea, creativity. This space is welcome to everybody. It's a multi-generational space.
I come to Blackwood shopping and I just walking past and I thought, oh, what's going on in there? So I came in and that was it. I've been here ever since. You learn more about everything and there's so much to do in there. Arts, crafts, everything.
But you've got everything here. You know what's going on in the local area.
Yes, it's brilliant.
I mean, I didn't know they were doing belly dancing on the high street of an evening.
This is what we call our signpost pillar, and our signpost pillar is really to signpost to any services in the area, so things our public wouldn't know, maybe numbers or emails to, we direct them to this. This is our What's What wall. Essentially our What's What wall tells you everything about our democracy and information that you need to be well informed so that you can make informed decisions about democracy and using your voice. Coming around then, we've got our lovely quiet areas, I like to call it. This is where you've got the thought tree wall. You can come in, you can pick up a leaf, you can write feedback about our shop, answer the question of the day, or just generally your thoughts and feelings around democracy, about culture, about creativity. And you can pop around our wall here. And if I bring you around to our next section, our gallery wall as we come through, hi Terry, we have got Kate Rigby up at the moment. And this is fantastic because this is her artwork, but also it's immersive as well for the visitors. And as you come around, this is our creative workshop station.
Well, I did a similar workshop here. It was interesting that we didn't do much writing, did we? But we had loads of conversation and it was an amazing platform for discussing. We chatted about the environment, didn't we? We chatted about local issues. I was amazed at how much we had covered. I was pleasantly surprised myself. It was an excellent platform to chat about so many different things.
Another way for people to get involved in democracy, so we call it democratic deliberation. How do we use creativity, information and conversation through different creative approaches to increase democratic and cultural participation?
I love coming to the talking shop because it's the best thing you know, ever happened to me.
It is like a family community in here now.
And that is it. And that is the Talking Shop in Blackwood.
Thanks, Jen. And thank you all for listening.
Fab, thank you, Yvonne. Very well timed there with your video at the end. That's that's impressive. And thank you both. That's been really helpful. I can see a couple of questions coming in, but yeah, now is your chance to put your questions to these two speakers, and we will have some discussion. I just wanted to come quickly to you, Sarah, before going to some of the questions. I first came across the work that you're doing when I was chatting to Vale of Glamorgan about their placemaking plans for town centres, and obviously the areas you're working in aren't in the very heart of Barry. They're not in sort of right in the town centres, and you know, lots of placemaking plans, because of the nature of the funding available, really focus very tightly on a town centre. But the way you described your involvement with the placemaking plan and the relationship of what you're doing with the placemaking plan is understanding that people in these communities don't really engage with their town centres in a way that others do. And part of this process is trying to understand why that might be and how to break down some of those barriers. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that side of things, and how, you know, what some of those barriers are and how you might be going about breaking those down?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, the three areas are outside the town centre. One LSOA, so that's Buttrells, is a lot closer. And I would say that if they were going to go and do a little food shop or something, they probably would be going into the town centre, whereas the other two are further out. They don't like to go into town. They don't like to leave their very close area, but what comes through in that is a strength of community spirit, and that's what they all talk about, that the community spirit is amazing. You know, I live in Cardiff city centre. If I run out of coffee, I've got to get to a shop, whereas these people, if they run out of coffee, there's about 15 neighbours they could ask someone to come and feed their hamster. You know, it's a real strength. We've been working, though, feeding that into the placemaking plan for Barry, and trying to explore why it is that people feel disengaged with the centre. One of the reasons that comes out a lot is public transport. And as you could see in our achievements, that we'd had updated some of the bus stops. There wasn't enough money to really go to town on them, but we've painted them. They don't look as threatening as they were. But the more conversations that you have, the more you see those blocks. So we're working with Cardiff Bus to see what can be done around the bus service itself. The Cardiff Bus do say, oh, you know, there are these buses, but they stop at 3 p.m. And so if people are going into town, they can't get home. So it's about working with the service providers and trying to get them to understand the community point of view. I think, yeah, so it's more about just feeding it into the plan, really. And then we're working in terms of trying to get people to not trying to get people, but trying to understand people's motivations and working around that. A lot of that comes from confidence and anxiety. So we're sort of trying to tackle that a little bit further back, and using our employment services to encourage volunteering, to increase confidence. So we've got some members of the community that, you know, they were working with the family engager, but now that we've sort of got involved, we've got them into a volunteering role very slowly but surely, but they're doing it. And that's giving them a bit more confidence then to come out and join our workshops and things. But it's a very slow process, and that will then help create the going to somewhere that you aren't familiar with. It's not a threat to you. It can be an enlightenment, it can really give something to your life. So it's a slow process in terms of that. And an easy answer is what we've given about the public transport and understanding what those blockages are. But the one that's going to take a lot longer is sort of a culture change, that unfamiliar doesn't mean dangerous. And I think that involves a lot more services than just the placemaking team.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's really important to understand, that there are sort of physical kind of transport challenges, but then there's a whole series of perhaps psychological or social issues as well that go on behind the scenes, that unless you're talking to those people who aren't there now, you're not going to understand those. So I think that's really key. Thank you, Sarah. Question in the Q&A for Yvonne, saying, presume councils still run a more traditional consultations with architects, etc., around changes. How does this currently link with the talking shop, which seeks to be a lot more unconsultation? So I think towards the end of your presentation there, Yvonne, you talked about, could these be permanent places where, rather than, just springing a consultation on a community, this is the place to go to have those chats?
Yeah, I don't think we need to do away with consultation. I just think we need to make it a much more nuanced tool, so that the concept for the talking shop is, if we had one in every local authority, plus the talking shop on tour, which I launched in the summer, that can go and reach further around, and plus a tiny talking shop where you can just literally take the sofa and a lamp for very quick momentary conversations. If you had that happening all year round, and all those conversations were being fed into the local authority and all the public bodies, then you would just then need to find certain moments that you needed consultation for. Whereas at the moment, we've got complete consultation fatigue and a lack of a feedback loop, which is great to hear Sarah, how she's closing that feedback loop, which is really nice, so that people can start seeing how those conversations with her are having an impact, because closing that is incredibly important. And I think what Sarah's talking about, which is the whole system, is really key as well, because people are, A, don't understand the system, but B, are talking about all different parts of the system in what are affecting their lives and affecting their health, affecting their all levels of areas of their deprivation. So that's why the model of the talking shop going forward needs to include all the components of the system as core partners, so that we've got Transport for Wales, the police, the local authority, the health board, all part of the core partnership of each talking shop. That's what I'm trying to pioneer.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Just leading on from that, say there are some local authorities on this webinar today thinking, that sounds great, it would be great to have one of those on my high street. What would be the first step of that, or what needs to be in place, or what is the bare bones of you need to get a talking shop going?
So have a conversation with me to begin with. Where I'm at the moment is that I'm trying to pioneer the first one. So I've got amazing support from people like the Future Generations Commissioner, which is quite amazing, who's endorsed it. But I don't mind where that first one is. At the moment, we're exploring the possibility of it being in RCT, because the health board there have come to me and they've started a stakeholder conversation, which we had in September. And then the plan is to have a follow-up partner meeting before Christmas. But you know what, if there's a race for the first local authority to host the first permanent long-term talking shop, I don't think that's an unhealthy thing. So get in touch with me. The first point is to gather loads of stakeholders together and go, how do we do this? How do we make this happen? Because actually it doesn't need new money, it needs existing money repurposed. So money that's already there for consultation, engagement, marketing, comms, engagement, involvement, all of that stuff, and that we have to do this work. It's in legislation. It's in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And at the moment, it's not being done enough. And Sarah is doing a sterling job, I would say, in the work that she's just presented. And her pillars of engagement, I totally endorse. The stuff about stuff needing to be consistent, deep, ongoing engagement, that's all the stuff that all my research shows. People don't want pop-ups. They don't want, you know, one-off workshops. They're not interested in that. The fact that she's going to where people are is really, really key. That's why the Talking Shop is in a shop, because people told me years ago the barriers to democratic, to cultural engagement. And they said, if it's where the shops were, then we would come. Everyone walks into shops. Everyone knows when they're open. The Talking Shop mirrors a shop in that it's open 6 days a week, 9:30 till 5:30. One of the key barriers that people have told me is they don't know when things are on, because it's on every other Tuesday. Sometimes it's on the first Monday of the month. It's only on at 11 o'clock. And if you haven't come to the first one, then you can't come to the second one. And you need to book 3 weeks in advance. And if you haven't done that, then you can't get a cup of tea. The Talking Shop, the doors just open all the time. And I have spent the last 10 years researching what barriers are that stop people from walking through these doors and engaging and involving. And Sarah's doing some of it already. Do you know what I mean? Particularly around using creative approaches to having those conversations, which I just think is fantastic. Well done, Sarah. I'm loving what you're doing.
Great. I'm sure there's some mutual appreciation of different approaches here. I feel Swansea have just thrown their hat in the ring there in the chat, so that's
Hello,
good.
Swansea.
A question here, I think this is for you, Sarah, a little bit more. Could you tell us a little bit more about the auto-enrolled index, please?
Yeah, of course. And thank you very much, Yvonne. It's so nice. Yeah, so when we were running our neurodiversity coffee mornings in the primary schools, I can't remember off the top of my head how many families we engaged with, but there were, I think, about 150. And as part of that, we were inviting our Flying Start team, our neurodiversity pathway community connectors, people from the health board, and our autism lead, who in Cardiff and Vale by chance sits on the regional partnership board. And he picked up through having those conversations and these coffee mornings that only about 30% of people were signed up to the index. Now, we believed that, you know, everyone who goes on the neurodiversity waiting list, assessment waiting list, gets a letter to say this index exists, sign up to it. But only 30% were signed up to it, which we were a bit shocked by. So he took that back to the RPB and they had discussions about it, and then they have now decided that so the system is going to be an auto enrollment. They've got to change some sort of IT bit, which isn't my forte, I'll be honest, around how that works and how one system speaks to the other one. I think it's around health board systems speaking to council systems, I believe, because the index is run by council. So anyone going on the waiting list will be auto signed up, and this is across Cardiff and the Vale, auto signed up to receive the index. And then if the family don't want to receive it, they can opt out very easily. But like I say, is a little bit of a wait on the IT systems being updated. But apparently they have done it in Flintshire, and apparently it works a lot better. So Keith Ingram, our autism lead in Cardiff and the Vale, he's leading on that with the regional partnership board. So we're really pleased that that's going to happen, and it's a really strong sort of improvement in processes to come out of this work.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Fab, there's a little bit of interaction going on in the chat, but I can't see any further questions. Last chance if you've got anything that you'd like to ask either of our speakers. I'm just going to drop in the chat as well the link to the next webinar. So as I mentioned, that's looking at funding ideas, and that's sort of a play on words, as in ideas for how to fund things, but also how you fund ideas, and particularly thinking about how to find funding for those sort of quick win projects that we like to see coming off the back of the placemaking plans. So do sign up for that. As I say, social value contributions and crowdfunding is where we're going to be focusing there. And then I'll also drop in there our YouTube channel link, because all the previous webinars are on there, and you'll be able to get those. But that also just leaves me to say a big thank you to our two speakers today. I hope you agree there's been lots of food for thought and inspiration and energy from the two speakers around how to do some of these things, and lots of key messages. You know, even if you're not specifically doing either of these things, lots of key messages we can take away about what not to do and how best to approach some of these things. So thank you very much, Sarah and Yvonne. If you would like any further contact with either, I'm sure we can put you in touch and have any follow-up conversations. I know Yvonne's dropped her contact details in the chat as well. So thank you so much for joining us. We will let you know when the YouTube recording is up online, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks very much. Bye.